But there were two visits. You saw it, then you brought some people back with you.
Yeah.
And what happened the next time? They made you cool your heels for a while.
No.
No? Well, Adele Goldberg says otherwise.
What do you mean?
Well, she did the demo when the group came back, and she said that she argued against doing it for 3 hours. And they took you other places and showed you other things while she was arguing.
So you mean they were reluctant to show us the demo?
She was.
Oh, okay. Oh, I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't remember that. Not that you meant something else.
So they were very skillful.
Yeah. But they did show us.
Yeah.
So, and it's good that they showed us because the technology crashed and burned at Xerox. And they used to call what's that?
No, I was just...
Why?
Yeah, why?
Oh, I actually thought a lot about that. And I learned more about that with John Scully later on. And I think I understand it now pretty well. What happens is, like with John Scully, John came from PepsiCo. And they at most would change their product, once every 10 years. I mean, to them, a new product was like a new size bottle, right? So if you were a product person, you couldn't change the course of that company very much. So who influenced the success of PepsiCo? The sales and marketing people. Therefore, they were the ones that got promoted, and therefore they were the ones that ran the company. Well, for PepsiCo, that might have been okay. But it turns out the same thing can happen in technology companies that get monopolies. Like, IBM and Xerox. If you were a product person at IBM or Xerox, so you make a better copy or a better computer. So what? When you have a monopoly market share, the company's not any more successful. So the people that can make the company more successful are sales and marketing people. And they end up running the companies. And the product people get driven out of the decision-making forums. And the companies forget what it means to make great products. Sort of the product sensibility and the product genius that brought them to that monopolistic position gets rotted out by people running these companies who have no conception of a good product versus a bad product. They have no conception of the craftsmanship that's required to take a good idea and turn it into a good product. And they really have no feeling in their hearts, usually, about wanting to really help the customers. So that's what happened at Xerox. The people at Xerox PARC used to call the people that ran Xerox toner heads. And these toner heads would come out to Xerox PARC and they just had no clue about what they were seeing.
And for our audience, toner is what?
Oh, toner. Toner is what you put into a copier. Yeah, the toner that you add to an industrial copier.
The black stuff.
The black stuff, yeah. So basically they were copier heads that just had no clue about a computer or what it could do. And so they just grabbed defeat from the greatest victory in the computer industry. Xerox could have owned the entire computer industry today. Could have been, a company 10 times its size. Could have been IBM. Could have been the IBM of the 90s. Could have been the Microsoft of the 90s. So, but anyway, that's all ancient history. It doesn't really matter anymore.
Sure. You mentioned IBM. When IBM entered the market, was that a daunting thing for you at Apple?
Oh, sure. Here was Apple, a $1 billion company, and here was IBM at that time, probably about a 30-some-odd billion-dollar company entering the market. Sure it was. It was very scary. We made a very big mistake, though. IBM's first product was terrible. It was really bad. And we made a mistake of not realizing that a lot of other people had a very strong vested interest in helping IBM make it better. So if it had just been up to IBM, they would have crashed and burned. But IBM did have I think, a genius in their approach, which was to have a lot of other people have a vested interest in their success. And that's what saved them in the end.
So you came back from visiting Xerox PARC with a vision. Mm-hmm. And how did you implement the vision?
Well, I got our best people together and started to get them working on this. The problem was that we'd hired a bunch of people from Hewlett-Packard. And they didn't get this idea. They didn't get it. I remember having dramatic arguments with some of these people who thought the coolest thing in user interface was soft keys at the bottom of a screen. They had no concept of proportionally spaced fonts, no concept of a mouse. Matter of fact, I remember arguing with these folks, people screaming at me that it would take us 5 years to engineer a mouse and it would cost $300 to build. And I finally got fed up. I just went outside and found David Kelly Design and asked them to design me a mouse. And in 90 days, we had a mouse we could build for $15 that was phenomenally reliable. So I found that, in a way, Apple did not have the caliber of people that was necessary to seize this idea in many ways. And there was a core team that did, but there was a larger team that mostly had come from Hewlett-Packard that didn't have a clue.
Well, it becomes this issue of professionalism. There's a dark side and a light side to it, isn't it?
No, you know what it is? No, it's not dark and light. It's that people get confused. Companies get confused. When they start getting bigger, they want to replicate their initial success. And a lot of them think, well, somehow there's some magic in the process of how that success was created. So they start to try to institutionalize process across the company. And before very long, people get very confused that the process is the content. And that's ultimately the downfall of IBM. IBM has the best process people in the world. They just forgot about the content. And that's what happened a little bit at Apple, too. We had a lot of people who were great at management process. They just didn't have a clue as to the content. And in my career, I found that the best people, are the ones that really understand the content, and they're a pain in the butt to manage, but you put up with it because they're so great at the content. And that's what makes great products. It's not process, it's content. So we had a little bit of that problem at Apple. And that problem eventually resulted in the Lisa, which had its moments of brilliance. In a way, it was very far ahead of its time. But there wasn't enough fundamental content understanding. Apple drifted too far away from its roots. To these Hewlett-Packard guys, $10,000 was cheap. To our market, to our distribution channels, $10,000 was impossible. So we produced a product that was a complete mismatch for the culture of our company, for the image of our company, for the distribution channels of our company, for our current customers. None of them could afford a product like that. And it failed.
Now you and John Couch fought for leadership of the
Absolutely, and I lost. That's correct.
How did that come about?
Well, I thought Lisa was in serious trouble. I thought Lisa was going off in this very bad direction, as I've just described. And I could not convince enough people and the senior management of Apple that was the case. And we ran the place as a team for the most part. So I lost. And at that point in time, I brooded for a few months. But it was not very long after that it really occurred to me that if we didn't do something here, the Apple II was running out of gas. And we needed to do something with this technology fast, or else Apple might cease to exist as the company that it was. And so I formed a small team to do the Macintosh. And, we were on a mission from God, to save Apple. No one else thought so, but it turned out we were right. And as we evolved the Mac, it became very clear that this was also a way of reinventing Apple. We reinvented everything. We reinvented manufacturing. I visited probably 80 automated factories in Japan, and we built the world's first automated computer factory in the world in California here. So we adopted the 68,000 microprocessor that Lisa had. We negotiated a price that was a fifth of what Lisa was going to pay for it because we were going to use it in much higher volume. And we really started to design this product that could be sold for $1,000 called the Macintosh. And we didn't make it. We could have sold it at $2,000, although we came out at $2,500. And we spent 4 years of our life doing that. We built the product. We built the automated factory, the machine to build the machine. We built a completely new distribution system. We built a completely different marketing approach. And I think it worked pretty well.
Now, you motivated this team. I mean, you had to guide them.
We had to build the team.
We build a team, motivate it, guide them, deal with them. You know, we've interviewed just lots and lots of people from the Macintosh team.
Good.
And you know, what it keeps coming down to is your passion, your vision, and you know, how do you order your priorities in there? What's important to you in the development of a product?
You know, one of the things that really hurt Apple was after I left, John Sculley got a very serious disease. And that disease, I've seen other people get it too. It's the disease of thinking that a really great idea is 90% of the work. And that if you just tell all these other people, you know, here's this great idea, then of course they can go off and make it happen. And the problem with that is that there's just a tremendous amount of craftsmanship in between a great idea and a great product. And as you evolve that great idea, it changes and grows. It never comes out like it starts because you learn a lot more as you get into the subtleties of it. And you also find there's tremendous trade-offs that you have to make. I mean, you know, there are just certain things you can't make electrons do. There are certain things you can't make plastic do or glass do. And as you get into, or factories do, or robots do. And as you get into all these things, designing a product is keeping 5,000 things in your brain, these concepts, and fitting them all together in kind of continuing to push to fit them together in new and different ways to get what you want. And every day you discover something new that is a new problem or a new opportunity to fit these things together a little differently. And it's that process that is the magic. And so we had a lot of great ideas when we started, but what I've always felt that a team of people doing something they really believe in is like when I was a young kid, there was a widowed man that lived up the street. And he was in his 80s. He's a little scary looking. And I got to know him a little bit. I think he might have paid me to mow his lawn or something. And one day he said, "Come on into my garage, I want to show you something." And he pulled out this dusty old rock tumbler. It was a motor and a coffee can and a little, you know, band between them. And he said, "Come on with me." We went out to the back and we got some rocks, some regular old ugly rocks. And we put them in the can with a little bit of liquid and a little bit of grit powder. And we closed the can up and he turned this motor on. He said, "Come back tomorrow." And his can was making a racket as the stones went around. And I came back the next day and we opened the can and we took out these amazingly beautiful polished rocks. The same common stones that had gone in through rubbing against each other like this, creating a little bit of friction, creating a little bit of noise, had come out these beautiful polished rocks. And that's always been in my mind, my metaphor for a team working really hard on something they're passionate about is that it's through the team, through that group of incredibly talented people bumping up against each other, having arguments, having fights sometimes, making some noise, and working together, they polish each other. And they polish the ideas, and what comes out are these really beautiful stones. Yeah. So it's hard to explain, and it's certainly not the result of one person. I mean, people like symbols, so I'm the symbol of certain things, but it really was a team effort on the Mac. Now, in my life, I observed something fairly early on at Apple, which I didn't know how to explain it then, but I've thought a lot about it since. Most things in life, the dynamic range between average and the best is at most 2 to 1. Right? Like if you go to New York City and you get an average taxi cab driver versus the best taxi cab driver, you're probably going to get to your destination with the best taxi cab maybe 30% faster. In an automobile, what's the difference between an average and the best? Maybe, 20%. The best CD player and an average CD player, 20%. So 2 to 1 is a big, big dynamic range in most of life. In software, and it used to be the case in hardware too, the difference between average and the best is 50 to 1, maybe 100 to 1.
Easy.
Okay? Yeah. Very few things in life are like this, but what I was lucky enough to spend my life in is like this. And so I've built a lot of my success off finding these truly gifted people and not settling for B and C players, but really going for the A players. And I found something. I found that when you get enough A players together, when you go through the incredible work to find, 5 of these A players, they really like working with each other because they've never had a chance to do that before. And they don't want to work with B and C players. And so it becomes self-policing. And they only want to hire more A players. And so you build up these pockets of A players and it propagates. And that's what the Mac team was like. They were all A players. And these were extraordinarily talented people. So,
but there are also people who now say that they don't have the energy anymore to work for you.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Oh, I think if you talk to a lot of people on the Mac team, they will tell you it was the hardest they've ever worked in their life. Some of them will tell you it was, the happiest they've ever been in their life. But I think all of them will tell you that it is certainly one of the most intense and cherished experiences they will ever have in their life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they did.
So, it's some of those things you are not sustainable for some people.
What does it mean when you tell someone their work is shit?
It usually means their work is shit. Sometimes it means I think your work is shit and I'm wrong. But usually it means their work is not anywhere near good enough.
We have this great quote from Bill Atkinson who says, when you say get someone's work as shit, you really mean, I don't quite understand it. Would you please explain it to me?
No, that's not usually what I meant. When you get really good people, they know they're really good and you don't have to baby people's egos so much. And what really matters is the work. And everybody knows that. That's all that matters is the work. So people are being counted on to do specific pieces of the puzzle. And the most important thing I think you can do for somebody who's really good and who's really being counted on is to point out to them when their work isn't good enough. And to do it very clearly and to articulate why, and to get them back on track. And you need to do that in a way that does not call into question your confidence in their abilities, but leaves not too much room for interpretation that it's the work that they have done for this particular thing is not good enough to support the goal of the team. And that's a hard thing to do. And I've always taken a very direct approach. So, and I think if you talk to people that have worked with me, the really good people have found it beneficial. Some people have hated it, but, and I'm also one of these people that I don't really care about being right, I just care about success. So you'll find a lot of people that will tell you that I had a very strong opinion and they presented evidence to the contrary, and 5 minutes later I completely changed my mind. Because I'm like that. I don't mind being wrong. And I'll admit that I'm wrong a lot. It doesn't really matter to me too much. What matters to me is that we do the right thing.
So how and why did Apple get into desktop publishing, which would become the Mac's killer app?
I don't know if you know this, but we got the first Canon laser printer engine shipped in the United States at Apple. And we had it hooked up to a Lisa actually imaging pages before anybody, before HP, long before Adobe. But I heard a few times people would tell me, hey, there's these guys over in this garage that left Xerox Park. You ought to go see them. And I finally went and saw them. And I saw what they were doing. And it was better than what we were doing. And they were going to be a hardware company. They wanted to make printers and the whole thing. And so I talked them into being a software company. And we, within 2 or 3 weeks, we had canceled our internal project. A bunch of people wanted to kill me over this, but we did it. And I had cut a deal with Adobe to use their software, and we bought 19.9% of Adobe at Apple. They needed some financing. We wanted a little bit of control. And we were off to the races. And so we got the engines from Canon. We designed the first laser printer controller at Apple. And we got the software from Adobe, and we introduced the laser writer. And no one at the company wanted to do it, but a few of us in the Mac group. Everybody thought a $7,000 printer was crazy. What they didn't understand was you could share it with AppleTalk. I mean, they understood it intellectually, but they didn't understand it viscerally, because the last really expensive thing we tried to sell was Lisa. So we pushed this thing through, and I had to basically do it over a few dead bodies, but we pushed this thing through, and it was the first laser printer on the market, as you know. And, the rest is history. When I left Apple, Apple was the largest printer company measured by revenue in the world. Wow. It lost that distinction to Hewlett-Packard about 3-4 years after I left, unfortunately. But when I left, it was the largest printer company in the world.
Did you envision desktop publishing? Was that a no-brainer?
Yes. But we also envisioned really the networked office. Mm-hmm. And so in January of 1995, when we had our annual meeting and introduced our new products, I made probably the largest marketing blunder of my career. 1985, sorry. Yeah. Made probably the largest marketing blunder of my career by announcing the Macintosh Office instead of just desktop publishing. Mm. And we had desktop publishing as a major component of that, but we announced a bunch of other stuff as well. And I think we should have just focused on desktop publishing at that time.
After serious disagreements with Apple's CEO John Sculley, Steve left the company in 1985.
Tell us about your departure from Apple.
Oh, it was very painful. I'm not even sure I want to talk about it. What can I say? I hired the wrong guy.
That was Sculley?
Yeah. And he destroyed everything I'd spent 10 years working for. Starting with me, but that wasn't the saddest part. I would have gladly left Apple if Apple would have turned out like I'd wanted it to.